So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Dialogues. We have an extraordinary gentleman with us at the moment who does arise initially from the great Emerald Isle, but actually now is living all over the world. And I believe at this moment is in Kenya. So, it's quite late in the evening to Damien. So, welcome, Damien. Wonderful to have
Thank
you
you,
here.
sir. Thank you for having me, and really nice to meet everyone here as well, to connect with you all. And yeah, beautiful.
I just want to share with everybody. Oh, bless you. Sorry, you suddenly faded out. Sorry to cut in there. I just wanted to share your bio with you. Then
Sure.
I can apply all of my concentration and focus into the wonder of you. So I just want to address you professionally and allow everybody to recognize who you are. So Damien, with an E, is a spiritual pioneer working as an international business coach, a consciousness hacker, and a spirit teacher. Damien's been working in the holistic healing field for 20 years or more, supporting thousands of people around the globe to release the resistance that impedes truth and inspiring them towards the massive leap of living a life full of potential. The bedrock basis of Damien's work is a total self-empowerment process, for he has the ability to look into one's energy system and to microscopically pinpoint what lies within the root of our individual blockages, or indeed the collective. He then helps to transform the impediment or the blockage, I tend to refer to them as being holding points, in an extremely efficient and loving way, for he believes that transformation can occur in the flash of a divine moment, rather than taking years and years of implosive therapy. So welcome, Damien. I'm fascinated by the title of this dialogue, Hacking Consciousness, or Hacking Your Consciousness. Perhaps we could begin there with what exactly does that mean for you?
So thank you, Stuart. So this work, yeah, in the beginning when I first started this work, it was happening really with spirit, and I held space, and I didn't realize what was really going on till years later into the process. And when I moved I've been drawn to live in different locations. And when I moved to Greece, I was drawn to many different ancient sites. And the ancient wisdom opened up, which was living archives of information, which started to open up, and they started to share with me or to teach me. And what that was teaching me that everything is systems, and then how to access a system, how to work with a system, and how to read with a system. So they started to teach me about business, about health, about finances, about if you want to have a child, for example, different health conditions. So each temple or each archetype would teach me. So I started to read what I was doing, more or less, what was happening before. Well, it's spirit working through me. So it got a lot easier, and I started to be able to read exactly through these teachings. I started to be able to read these systems in a very, very basic but very easy way, actually, and to realize that everything is a system. And then when you connect with the divine within us, the blueprints, the codes of the divine, everything starts going back into alignment, or anything that isn't in alignment will show up in the system when you bring an intention in. So this is why I started being guided to work with world leaders, for example, or when working with groups. It was really bringing all this system work into play. But it's almost like the way I experience it is that I have to experience it myself and work it in myself vibrationally. And when I work through whatever traumas in my system or ancestral epigenetic belief systems, then I can bring someone there myself. And it's interesting living in Kenya. I'm working a lot with the tribes here in Kenya as well, and the knowledge here. Each place I'm being drawn to or guided to live in opens up different systems. So I've been working very much with the forests here and the healing abilities of the different trees. So through the ancient wisdom here, and it's interesting. A friend was telling me here about, I, for example, lost a twin in the womb, and in the tribes here, they say, well, to do this work, it would be necessary for a lot of the tribes who are doing this work to have a twin or have lost a twin to work with the systems. Because if you lose a twin, for example, you have an ability to enter and read systems very easily. You were born that way, within the womb with two. So you have an ability to transform heaviness. And because you experience the loss of a twin, and I also, when I was born, I passed a little bit and then came back into the body. So when I experienced that, that happened to me a few times in my life. So when I experienced that, I have an ability to bring people, to hold space, to bring people back almost from the edge back into life. So all the different traumas I've experienced myself, I've worked through, I can bring people through those fields.
Right.
So that's where this hacking part came in. It's really to be able to read the system, see what's out of alignment, with the epigenetics, with the ancestral information, which is very prevalent at the moment, and to transform it.
Right. So it's interesting, just two further expansions or extrapolations. For me, and maybe this is absolutely inaccurate, for me, hacking has always had a pejorative context. So it's actually about breaking into a system to possibly use whatever information is garnered in a nefarious way. But on this occasion, we're really talking about, we're using hacking as a metaphor, showing the ability that you have to move deep into what you're referring to being energy systems, which I feel are fields of consciousness. For example, tribal consciousness is very different, although all human beings are, human beings are human beings. What's so fascinating is that human nature is the same wherever we go in the world. It's just that human beings slightly change in terms of their cultural context. So moving from tribal consciousness, which tends to be much more truthful, much more earthy, much more real, and also more respectful or in reverence of spirit. Is this what you've discovered? And ancestral line.
Absolutely, yeah.
Governmental context, dealing with some of the world leaders that you're talking about, that you're working with, and seeing the games that people play. Have you found your own linguistic, or indeed your own energy capacities? Have you found it quite easy to move between the two energy fields?
Well, that's what Spirit taught me years ago. It's like to stay in compassion with everybody and never to judge people. And that's the only way I can work, is not to judge. And to enter a system for me is about, hacking into a system. To enter a system is simply through the word, or the sense of intention, my intention to enter the system. And if I enter the system unconditionally, then the system will open and it will embrace me. And because at that point we are in the divine, consciousness at that point, or the Fibonacci codes, we will always evolve to a higher state. So everything that you're being drawn to will always evolve when you enter a system from that point, from pure consciousness.
Yeah, amazing. So what you're sharing with us has many implications, doesn't it? I mean, not just simply the diversity of our own social context or our own social dynamics, but also we as spiritual beings having a human experience of how we're looking into the multidimensionality of our beings, not just looking into, that sounds really superficial, but really entering into a very profound conversation with the I am presence, with the Godhead within. And of course, many of us have conversations about moving between different timelines and moving into out-of-body experiences so that we can actually acquire information from the Akashic and then bring it back. So it seems to me that there are very specific techniques that Spirit has shown you and that you've learned as a humanoid individual to be able to move between these different social contexts. Which is also something that I have a little bit of experience with, having always been in touch with the multidimensional universe, but also working with world politicians and business leaders and so forth, and how we subtly disguise ourselves as magicians so that we can move into all of those different fields, but also be acceptable to the individuals who are there.
Yes, it's very interesting when you work with someone, for example, who has a lot of power in this life system. It means for me that they've had a lot of power in another life system. So they've worked it in their system. And what Spirit was guiding me to do at one point is that, okay, Damien, you have to support them to stay in their center, to stay in their essence, you know? So it's like stay in their channel. Because if there's a wound in the system and you get that much power, it's like putting a magnifying glass on the ego or on separation, and then destruction comes into the system, or greed comes into the system. So it's, yeah, I really love to do that work, because when you work with one person, you're working probably with millions of people who are going to have a positive impact from that type of work. So yeah, what I find, it's interesting that they sort of are drawn to me. We're sort of guided to each other, and then the language which is meant to open up will open up. So it's, yeah, the different systems, what you said about you're very right about the tribal, you know, compared to what's, for example, in Ireland, you know, with our genetics. And for me, it's about really honoring my essence is pure before I enter this vessel. And then when I enter the vessel, then I'm plugging into the genetic, the ancestral information of both my mom, my dad's system. So for me, the key would be really, our Spirit was showing me that I must honor my genetic place. And then I must honor as well that, you know, my genetic place of my mom, my dad, to activate my DNA. And if I'm adopted, for example, I've worked with many adopted people, and they feel like, I can't find my parents. Their soul knows. So the parents who brought you up are like parents, but I don't want you to open up to Spirit, to open up to your ancestral, to your parents. And that way it activates the genetic fields which are in all of us. And it's quite heavy, the genetic fields, because especially at the moment, I feel we're being pushed by Spirit to really resolve what's in our system, because this is the vehicle that we're in. And this has got all the information of all my ancestors' life experiences on all levels, you know, very conscious information, very conscious gifts. And also it's got their own wounds in the system. And I think it's mine, but it's actually, a lot of it's belonged to my ancestors. So recently it's been really shown me, I've been bringing different techniques that are coming in over the years, but they're always aligned with where we are as a collective. And these sort of techniques, I'll call them techniques, came true to resolve whatever the collective topic is. And for me, what's coming true is it's about breaking out of karmic cycles at the moment. That's what I've experienced. And it's to honor that I'm responsible for all I create within and around me. And then to work with the epigenetic system that's in me, in my, you know, if you imagine your DNA, all the full life experience of each ancestor is in my blood, and it's in my system, it's in my subconsciousness. So, and this is in my relationship as well. And it's quite heavy to live like that. So what's been coming true recently is to honor, really to set up the genetic fields that everybody's honored in the genetic place, especially the missing children. You know, if there's miscarriage or abortion, or any children that are missing, or fathers and mothers in the ancestral line. So to really allow that everyone's honored in the right genetic place. And you'd call it a blueprint, and this would open up on both sides. And even genetics of your partner is going to be connected to your system. So your partner's ancestors would be in your system too, supporting your ancestors, vice versa. And then there'd be a point where what I was showing was that we can, because we're creators, we can choose to step out of the imprints and reconnect to the gifts. So really I was showing a way that to support all the ancestors individually, you know, because they didn't have the abilities we're having at the moment. And they have different abilities. So what I do is I send the knowledge back through the ancestral line to the higher selves. And that way I can hold space for all the ancestors who brought the topics into the system to reclaim them back and to transform them. And then there's a river of gifts going to you. And when I did this myself, I was so overwhelmed in a positive way, a way that I had so much compassion for my ancestors. I could feel, you know, my great grandmother, for example, the wisdom she has. Whereas before I used to tap back and say, oh, what she went through, it's terrible. You know, I'd feel more of her wounds. But now I can feel the wisdom of the ancestors, and many of them are there supporting me, and how beautiful that is. So for me, this year really is about the wisdom and to align as a creator and to move forward as a creator. And we're responsible for everything we create.
Yeah, this is beautiful, Damien, absolutely beautiful, and particularly beautiful for me because I cohere absolutely with what you're saying. And I feel that I'm being drawn more and more and more to going deep into my own relationship with karma and, why I may not be able to, at this moment in time, create the visionary status that I want in 3D, purely and simply because I'm being encouraged to go deeper and deeper and deeper into karma, which of course, I mean, this is happening on an individual level and also on a collective level, because as you were just saying, as soon as we open up the field of what that promise is all about and we're pure in intention, then people start coming and asking for help in the same way. And I was intrigued by, and of course, this is just apropos what this year is all about, isn't it, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, because Pluto is really the governor of the underworld, going deep into the unconscious and exercising rebirth and resurrection. But before we get there, there has to be a death to the old system. So I'm sure you would agree with me that on a collective level, but please say no if you don't, but on a collective level, I feel that we're going to see many social systems, particularly the central organizing principles of our world to do with central government and institutions, going through dramatic shifts in relation to this substance. However, one of the things that I'd love you to define, if you could, because you've used the term several times, what exactly epigenetics means. And secondly, if you could give us an insight, I mean, you've described it very beautifully, but could you give it an insight about how you ground the potentials that you've just shared with us? I mean, for example, does this mean that rather than just thinking about it, you move yourself, your dear ones, or indeed the people that you're working with through ritual so that the information is more fully embodied?
Yeah, so what's been coming up for me, Stuart, is that it's to make the unconscious conscious. So first I would want to work with resolve any, anger that's in my system, to find it in the body. For me, the body is the roadmap for healing. And so I work very much with the cellular information and to bring the unconscious parts of our system or the frozen parts of our system back into life, back into movement, back into flow, back into rhythm, the ocean of the universe of creations, what flows through me. So the epigenetics for me would be, it's interesting, when I set the intention, as I was talking about before, the intention, when I set the intention to open up the epigenetic systems within me, to make them conscious.
Could you just define what that means? What is epigenetics?
So for me, it's the ancestral information which they've gone through. For example, my grandmother may have lost a child or maybe got, separated, maybe at that stage felt like men are no good, So then that could be in my system, and then all my siblings maybe are not married. So it affects us without us knowing it. We think we're being creative, we think we're living our own lives, but actually those very strong belief systems affect us. Or it's interesting, I have a good example actually. I was talking to one of the tribes during the week, and they were saying it's the duty of the mother to pass on all the information of the ancestors. What I mean by that is, if there's someone with a short temper, it's very important that they pass this on to the children, because if the child is getting a short temper, they'll know where it came from. And this goes for everything. So they'll get a lot of, every generation will keep passing on the information of previous generations. And they will, if you've got a topic, you go back to somebody who's alive in the system, a grandma or a grandfather, and ask them, who has this trait? Where did it come from? And they would actually say, if the language was, if they didn't speak Swahili, they had their own native language, they would get an ancestor, ask the ancestors even who were past, please, can you tell them this is too heavy for them, and ask them to resolve it themselves. And they pass the information back, but they work as a collective. So even he was saying that, you know, if there's something strong, an illness or anything coming through, or a woman who was barren, for example, who couldn't conceive, they would go back to the village and ask, okay, who has experienced this in the ancestral line? And they would all scan the system. They would work as a system, and they'd all contact each other and they say, I know who it was. And they pass the information on. So this, for me, is epigenetics. This is how we can be aware of it. You know, in Ireland, we didn't pass on this information. You know, there's a lot of secrets. So this is where I asked Spirit, I said, please help me here, because I don't have that knowledge that, you know, the tribes have, because I wasn't passed on that information. Maybe I didn't ask enough questions within my family, but there's a lot of secrets in the system. And also, if you're not acknowledging what you went through, which is very common in Ireland, for example, it's not going to come up in the system. So I asked Spirit, says, okay, show me a way that we can do this in a very lightful way, very easy way, and also to get results in the system. So for me,
so how do you do this exactly? Because this is obviously, we're listening into your interpretation of your language with the spirit world. So is it you just, that sounds pejorative, I'm sorry, not just, but is it you, are we leaning into your psychic wisdom as you go in to have conversations, or is it revealed through the people that you're working with? I mean, do you take them through ritual so that they experience the physical experience of the ancestors coming through, whether it be their great-great-great-grandmother, or because you're dealing with tribal consciousness, you may be dealing with a wisdom keeper or a shaman or a witch doctor or whatever. How does it happen exactly?
So what it happens in many ways. So every time I work, it's different. For example, every time I hold space, I call it hold space, it's different. So everyone that comes, or every group that I work with, it's always different. So I set the intention to open the space up, and with the intention to find out what is in the system of the person, what genetic memory fields are affecting the person. And then I ask the system. So I work through the system, setting up the system that everybody's in the right genetic place. So I first check the person, guide them into a ritual of being in their genetic place, and making sure they understand consciously what is a genetic place, and then honoring that everybody else in the family system is in the genetic place. And you will feel it. Everything gets lighter and smoother. And then I ask the system, now you can show up in the person. What are the topics which is too heavy for the person's system? Or maybe they'll come to me and say, Damien, I have this topic and I don't know where it's coming from, or it's affecting me. And we look into the system and they say, okay, well, it's true. It's the ancestral grief, for example. It's the ancestral rage. It's the ancestral addictions, or maybe it's the ancestral abuse, you know? So it shows up. Spirit will always show up what the intention is. It always goes back to the root cause. I always set the intention years ago that to go back to the root of everything through all the systems, and that's what shows up. So from that point, I call it like mapping. It's you know, hold space and you find the exact point. You stay with that point. You acknowledge it. So it's like a child who was you know maybe traumatized and they had to leave the body to survive. So it's like going back to the 5-year-old and holding space, but it's in timeless space. So it's in the quantum field. And in the quantum field, if I hold space for the 5-year-old that was maybe abused, now you've got an adult holding space. So they're not alone. I feel you. I hear you. I see you. I'm with you. And then it's a release from the body. And then automatically spirit will resolve it. It works through the system. So when you find those points, I hold space for the energy to become alive again and to express itself. Because for me, I work with embodiment, and parts how, you know, with our own trauma is where we dissociate it. So there's part of us that got lost in timeless space.
Mm.
So when I open up timeless space with present time, from present time, it will find all the moments of me where I was lost in timeless space, meaning that I dissociated. And then maybe in some says, Damien, you're no good at reading, okay? So my ability for reading will be left behind there. And then that will come back when I don't judge it and hold space. That part of my spirit will come back automatically into the system, but it's more through a resonance, through a feeling, through emotion. So it's not just the mind, it's a spirit working through the system.
It's this is amazing, Damien. I mean, it's so multi-layered, multi-dimensional, and puts a lot of responsibility on you in terms of your seership and your reading. And so this is often, of course, corroborated by the people that you're working with. Oh, yes, this is what's actually happening. This is what my experience is all about. And you know, it fascinates me also because there are many questions that I would want to ask of you as a soul brother, you know, in the sense that I'm also working extensively with shadow consciousness and going deep into, as you describe it, the epigenetic system. I want to touch back into, in a moment, into life before life and the reincarnational values. One of our wonderful people is somebody that I don't know very well, who was on retreat with me in Egypt this December, Yanis, who is originally from Latvia, but living, I don't know if you're in Dubai at the moment or if you're back in Malaga. Anyway, he's asking a really interesting question about the substance of reincarnation. So we'll go there in a moment. Actually, let's just go with this because I have so many questions from the observations that I noted from before when we were talking about working with tribal consciousness and then moving into the other form of consciousness of dealing with the boardroom or dealing with the, you know, parliamentary figures or dealing with the within all of this, because I noticed that there was that note that you made about the commentary that was provided for you by one of the tribal women, where she was saying it was her duty to pass on this information. And actually, the concept of duty is a really strong patriarchal construct, which we normally associate with Western thought processes, you know, with a Western gestalt, or gestalt rather, or the Western epigenetic. So it's quite fascinating that there is this understanding of, you know, for me, so many of the difficulties that we're seeing on the world stage is to do with tribal warfare. And they're all based on patriarchal constructs like you know, it is your duty to do this. It is your obligation to do this. You should do this. And you know, the way that you'll do this is you'll become a responsible individual. And if you don't, your mother's going to be upset. And if you don't, I'm going to disinherit you. And then you'll be lonely.
There's a difference. There's a difference, Stuart, what I found with the tribes.
Yes.
And what they do is exactly what I do. It's amazing because when they were talking to me, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I've been doing, you know? So we're all talking the same language when we get there, you know? And what they do is, it's exactly what I do. I connect straight to creation, to God, or whatever you want to call God or creation, source, and I go direct, okay? And from that point, I realize that there's other levels of consciousness. So, you know, for example, if I'm working with the forest, the different trees in the forest, medicinal trees, which I'm working very much with at the moment, you'd connect to the master tree of the forest. And first you connect to yourself, your higher self, God consciousness, and then you connect with the master tree, and the master tree will connect with you, guide you to the other trees, okay? Now that's the same thing for everything. So when I say duty, it's more than that. It's deeper than that. It's more wisdom. So it's wise to inform, to share the knowledge of your ancestral information with your children. It's more wisdom. I'd say wisdom than duty. It's more wisdom. The elders I would consider them very wise. So they have a connection of wisdom, which they knew through experiences that it works and it gets results. And this wisdom is guiding them and it's been shared down through the generations. So this goes for everything. And this is where I really have a lot of respect for the different tribes here, that, you know, they're still connected to the wisdom, really pure still. I love this because I feel, you know, what I felt last year was about disconnect and reconnect, you know, and I feel really by moving to Kenya, it was for me to disconnect and reconnect. And that was a big thing. It wasn't easy when I moved here first, because it was really, I was having free fall because my system didn't, you know, understand the systems. I couldn't, you know, it didn't have, I've no genetic information of what it's like to be here in Kenya. So, you know,
me. I would have felt that in the past life that you actually were a member of the tribes there. I'm joking.
Probably that was in Lamu, which is a different. It's different again. It's like the entry point to Kenya, and it always has been on the spice route. So it really,
this aspect that you're pinpointing about the level of wisdom consciousness that is so easily obtainable. It's not even obtainable because they're actually completely within the field of being able to, you know, one of the things that I was going to ask you is, what have you learned that you were able to bring into your own Caucasian existence about working with world leaders from the tribes people, about, for example, presence? So the fact that they're really present and they're easy with stillness and silence. Is this in your experience?
Yes, it was interesting. I was, for example, the spirit of the trees have been working very strong with me to bring in that stillness and presence, and to strip away any limiting belief systems, for example. And it was interesting. I was with one of the organizations. I was in a slum during the week, and they have this beautiful organization where they take the girls, young girls, and they educate them from the age of 4 up. And I stood in front of the class, and they were like incredible leaders. About, you know, they asked me the most wise questions. They're incredible, and I felt like they activated me in a way that they literally, you know, when I was in the slum, I felt such. It was like being in hell and heaven at the same time, and it was such an activation in me that I didn't want to leave. It was incredible, and because, for me, I was always drawn to the darkest, transform the darkest, and then go to the light. It wasn't just jump out of my body and go to the light. It was a bit like that in the beginning. But for me, I was always told, go to the heavier places and transform the heaviest places. And, you know, these girls had transformed the heavier places, and they had their dignity, their honor, their respect, they were wise, they were incredible. And so I felt like they gave me an activation for the leaders. Okay. So I noticed that it was coming into the work straight away. I have an ability from childhood, really, that I can access systems and almost get activations through the systems, because I'm entering a system that, you know, for example, when I was in Egypt or any place, I can immediately be activated with the wisdom of that area. It's just something that I know, an ability that I have. So I'm almost like downloading wisdom very fast into my system. So I just need to be in a place for sometimes a few minutes even, and then I have the wisdom in my system, and then it just runs through me for a couple of days. And then I share that wisdom into the genetics, like to build up the DNA in somebody. And going back to the leaders, you know, for example, if one of the leaders didn't have a strong archetype of a father or a mother, and I've experienced through the work I've done with, well, I got a lot of this from archetypal information, was very strong leaders, very strong father figures, very strong mother figures. And then I activate them into the person's genetics. Then their system builds up, and they gain that they're able to embody their essence more. So for me, it's it's interesting. Like somebody asked about past lives, you know, and That's something I can drop into immediately if you want, because I think
Let's go back there, because it was yes. What is Damien's take on reincarnation?
So I work. So for me, when someone makes transition, you make transition. The way I perceive it is to make transition through the cells and through the channel. And the issue comes up with reincarnation. For example, if this past life is still active, for me that means I always describe it like the Empire State Building, with different floors, and there's an elevator in the center. And every floor is a different lifetime or between lifetimes. And if there's a past life still active in you, that maybe I'm working with a leader and they're not confident with their power, or they may misuse their power, because maybe in one of those floors, they've misused the power and say, okay, I'm never going to take my power back. I don't trust myself. So that means they've left their essence of power behind. So what I do is I open up the system. And for me, past lives is, if that's open, it's trapped in an emotion within the spirit. So there's like an archive of information within us through emotions. So usually the past lives is a key through the emotions. If you got a very strong emotion coming up in your system of guilt or shame, it's usually connected to multidimensional places. But I will always check past lives. So what I do is I set the intention to open up and send any emotions which is connected to past lives through the etheric field to those different floors, because some of us have been here for thousands of years. So there could be thousands of floors. And then, maybe have similar vibration of misusing power in many of those different dimensions. So what I ask is first for the emotion to go up to the right floor it belongs to, the right lifetime. And then I invite that part of my spirit by bringing consciousness. It means there's part of me running around in that lifetime that never made transition. Maybe because I don't know that I'm dead. For example, if it's a car accident or I was shot very fast, maybe I don't know I'm dead. So I have to acknowledge that, let the spirit know that actually you've passed, you have to go to the light. Or maybe you were burnt and you got out of the body before transition, and then you don't want to go through to the light because you think the light is the flames. So then I have to talk with the spirit and say, okay, it's not the flames, it's the light, and make transition through the cells. The same for if I was, for example, if I drowned. Drowning takes time, so I would dissociate, I'd get out of the body. So a lot of people would get stuck. Or if I felt guilty, or I have something with a partner, they didn't say goodbye, or something that I didn't resolve, or I want to revenge. So these are the points where the spirit would not have made transition. So I invite those parts to make transition through the cells, through the channel, back into this life system. And then you have the wisdom and you start getting more rich inside. So your qualities come down from those lifetimes. And then when it's complete, it implodes. So I don't hang on to the story and say, oh, I was such and such in a past life. As soon as it's done, I get in, do the work, get out. It implodes, and forget about it, And then another one will open up. So for me, that's how I work with past lives. If I need to know the details, I will know the details. So I'm very open that I don't need to know all the details. But if I do need to know the details, I know spirit will let me know what happened there, or what story, or what is the theme of it, the emotion of that story, because it usually runs through many lifetimes. And then I'll play it out in this life too, with my dad or my mom or my ancestor, my partner. So yeah, that's how I work with past lives. So reincarnation, I believe in.
This is so beautiful, the way that you describe it. And it's so detailed and exquisite, the way that you're able to define. And I just wanted to refer back to the line in your bio about this ability that you have of microscopic perception, of being able to go right into the very core of whatever the holding point is, or whatever the blockage is, or whatever the crisis is that is not allowing full potential to flow through that individual, or a group of individuals. But what happens when you meet somebody who is very masked, and they're with you because they've heard about your reputation, or they're suffering in some deep way, but in the process that you're describing, they hold back from the freedom that pours through you in your flow and evident masterly accomplishment as you perceive all of these varying aspects of what you refer to as being systems? What happens?
So it's a good question. And the tribe was just telling me about that as well, because I'm working with them with the herbal medicines and, how to, if someone's having difficulty with fertility, for example. So their perception is that, you shouldn't be on the fence. You should be ready. You should be willing to work with the system and have the power to go through the system. So usually I would always, like anyone who's booking sessions or anyone worked with in the webinars, I always invite them, I'm really clear, I'll leave the responsibility with them to enter the system. And it's interesting, I always wondered why, I always, when I did this work, I was like, I want to give it out free, I want to give it to everybody, and I was like, it doesn't really work when it's free, and I was like, why is it really good when we charge, and then the more we charge, the more results we got. So it was because of the commitment, they commit. And also, if you charge them more, they're not going to be sitting on the fence just checking out Damien. They're going to work for it. So they're in their self-responsibility. So if I come across someone who's like that, I'll speak it out and I will ask them to go their self-responsibility if they like, or if they're ready to, or work with whatever level of consciousness they are ready to do. I remember there was a workshop years ago in Germany where a couple came and they asked for the money back, and I was like, they said they don't feel anything. I said, fantastic, thank you. You got everything you need, and I got everything I need as well. I'll give you your money back. And they were so floored by that. Well, they ended up staying in the end. But what I'm saying is they will get what they need, even if it's just for 5 minutes. I've had people walk out of workshops as well, and they would leave and they come back years later and say, oh my God, that really wasn't until later it resolved. So everybody will get what they need. And I'm really entrusting of spirit. And this put a lot of pressure on my system that I was told by spirit, Damien, you don't have to worry. Whoever appears in front of you, you have something for them and they have something for you. So otherwise they wouldn't be in front of you. So I simply hold space. Sometimes I get no information and it's perfect. Sometimes I get a lot of information and it's perfect. Sometimes they get the information and it's perfect. So it always works. We're being guided all the time.
It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And of course, you're holding the holy space, the sacred space of absolute reciprocity, the reciprocity of the way that you are at one and present with the universal mind, with the great Mother, Father, God principle, the way that you actually are able to go deep into the inner folds of creation and perceive the epigenetics, that microscopic aspect. But you're also balancing all of this with the fact that you are still a 3D human being. One of the personal sharings that I wanted to just drop in as a thought form to hear what your take is on this, that I've been, as you know, awakened to spirit for many, many years. And within the industry that I was working in, where I worked with a lot of very famous people, I was constantly being asked if I would work with politicians or CEOs or whatever. And I would step into that field with my field completely open to discover that they weren't at all interested in hearing the metaphoric consciousness that I was evoking in very simple ways. For example, the actor is an emotional gladiator. So the actor needs to be able to penetrate truth deep, deep, deep. How do you play a serial murderer but not actually become scorched yourself by the horrors of what the serial murderer goes through? Part of my experience technically was to always be there to ground, to anchor the great actor so that they were able to enter into that space, but actually still remain grounded, centered, present, by as a human being. One of the experiences that I had, for example, was helping a man who played Jesus Christ Superstar in the West End in the famous musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. And of course, Jesus goes through the process that Jesus goes through, and this particular individual was so sensitive, was so open to spirit, was so psychically aware that he literally went through what Jesus went through. So he was found in the dressing room after the show in this terrible state, not being able to piece together all of the vital information that he'd been through. And somebody said, I think you need to see Stewart Pearce, who by that time had a reputation within the entertainment industry in the UK. And so I worked with him, and of course we became great friends. And he was able to ground himself and stabilize all of those energies. However, what is it like for you when you move into the public context of dealing with world leaders?
It's interesting. I worked a lot with different actors as well and actresses. And for me, a great actor is a healer. Yeah. And in ancient Greece, they used to, beside all the ancient sites of healing, there was always a theater, because you have to open up the emotions. And the actors and actresses would open the emotions. So for me, I'd support them to work through their shadow, to go to the frequency of what they're meant to present to the audience. Because if they don't activate that within them, they're not going to activate it and open the opportunity for the audience to transform it. So yeah, working with world leaders, it's interesting. I always connect with somebody exactly where they're at, and will only open what they're ready for. So I connect so for me, how I connect with everybody is that I honor that first their genetic place. I honor that all their different levels of trauma, different levels of consciousness, and I honor that they're incredible, huge spirit. And by entering the space that way, spirit will work through maybe the ego or insecurity, and we'll find a point of entry, and it will come true. So my experience is that if you go in with no judgments of whoever it is you're working with, and you hold space knowing there's a huge spirit, knowing that they may not live their potential as well, knowing that there's abuse and manipulation in the system, knowing that all these aspects are there, the shadow aspects are there with you in that space, you will find that spirit will bring out the best in them, and they will receive what they need at that specific moment in time. And yeah, so I've had really beautiful experiences and really inspiring experiences, and I've worked with some really, really powerful people who I didn't expect to be conscious, and they know exactly how systems work. That's what amazed me, that a lot of them know how systems work already and knew what I was doing or knew how to work with systems. So the level of consciousness was really astonishing. And usually once I would maybe have some judgments and I'd have to work my system beforehand, I'm absolutely really astonished and humbled by the experience and the interaction. So I know it's very easy to judge people and throw stones, and it's incredible what's the journey every one of us has gone through, that we're still here. And it's very humbling to work with everybody, and we've all been through incredible experiences, and I think we've all done the best we can, and it's amazing that we're still here.
And of course, you bring such unconditional love to the arrangement of the operation, because you're working in such extraordinary ways. I mean, literally extraordinary ways with the supernatural aspect of spirit. What happens if you're dealing with somebody who is so impacted that it's very difficult? I mean, you can perceive what's actually happening on a spirit level, but from a personal, earthy, grounded level, they just refuse to budge. I'm just thinking. all the situations that I've been in where I brought forth in board meetings, or I mean, this is going back some time, admittedly, say 20, 25, 30, nearly 30 years ago, where I brought the subject of emotional intelligence to try and resolve a crisis that's being discussed in the meeting, and I've been told to get out, you know. Or if I mention the word soul or spirit, I was, oh, for God's sake, what are you talking about that for? You know, etc., etc. Do you ever meet aggressive elements of impactfulness?
I've been presented on, there's one popping up for me immediately when you say that. And I remember it was a board that I was put in front of with presidents, and it turned out it was an arms deal. And I was like, what on earth am I doing in this room, you know? And my alarm bells went off and says, oh my God, you have to stop this immediately, you know? And I had to lower my ego. I had to really sit with myself, say, okay, Damien, what has spirit got you doing in this room? Because I cannot put my word, I cannot speak out to everybody in the room. So what I did was I went around every person and I connected to their inner child and their wounds. And I connected to the president and I connected to his wounds. And I connected to his 5-year-old that, you know, was abused, and different parts of his childhood where he was bullied. And I sent unconditional love for those parts of him, which was getting involved in this deal. And then I went to the arms dealer and honored that the destruction he experienced and the child abuse he experienced and the ancestral abuse that was in the system. And I sent unconditional love to the one who was selling it. And it was amazing. I went through every person and it was amazing. The arms dealer disappeared.
How did you do that? Because I mean, there's time and activity taking place while you're doing that on spirit level, because you're working on a covert level, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm not.
By the way, I know that there is this issue, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly connect with your ancestors. This is through 3rd generations back who were involved in this arms deal. I mean, you don't go into a scenario, do you?
No.
That would be a really interesting film, actually, wouldn't it?
So what opens up is the system. I asked the system, why am I here, and what's the higher purpose of having Damien in this field? Yeah. And then spirit starts showing me what's the higher purpose, because I always ask, what's the higher purpose of having me there? And then spirit reveals it to me. And when I went around the space and honored everybody within the space and what was happening within the space and the level of trauma that was in the space, and honored that they're incredible spirits, each one of them was incredible on another level. And then this incredible part start working in the system. And then it went into recycling oil from oil that was used in all the restaurants, the president started saying. So it just churned into something completely different, and the arms deal just disappeared. So it's incredible how, if we do not judge and we read the systems and we acknowledge the systems and we hold space for what is in this field, the level of trauma that's in this field, or what's playing out in the field, you know. And if I'm judging them, it means there's a part of me that has the same vibration within me. So I'm working through those fields, you know, the destruction within me, you know. So we all have this within our system. So it's just to find it within myself. So first I had to work within my own system, and then the system transformed. So it's interesting. There is fields where I'm in and I cannot talk, you know, I cannot intervene like through talking, but I can with my presence. And if I hold presence and honor systems, I'll give you another example of when I was going to Egypt. There was a lot of fear on the plane, and it was about, you know, there was a Muslim man there, and there was many different people, but he scared a few people on the plane, and the whole plane went into fear that there's going to be a bomb on the plane, there's going to be something terrible, and everyone went into panic. And I noticed my own system raising up as well, and I said, no, stop, sit with it. And I honored, he's from a different system, to the gentleman sitting beside him. The stewardess is from a different system. I'm from a different system. And I start honoring all the different systems. And suddenly the chaos that was in the field just went quiet. And then the man's helping, the steward's trying to translate, what type of tea would you like? Do you want sugar in your tea? So everything went peaceful, and it went into a different state. So if we manage to stay in our 0 point, in our heart space, heart coherence, the field around us is affected by that. But if I go into a state of fear, anxiety, then I will
Yes.
create more of it. So that's really what I feel this year is about, that if I can stay pure within my own system, acknowledging the different aspects of my personality that's active without judging it, then I can transform the whole field, because we have the ability to transform the whole world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is beautiful, Damien, and it's sort of, there's another question from Yanis which I'd like to adhere to, because your answer to his statement about reincarnation is quite extraordinary. But just before I do this, I just want to remind everybody that the platform that you're visiting is completely free and is called Deep Dialogues. Not having a conversation. This is a deep dialogue. So it's my role as the interlocutor to find ways of really stimulating or startling the dialoguer to go deep into the causative nature of what indeed Damien's talking about. And so if it doesn't agree with you, I notice that we've triggered some judgment in people. If it doesn't agree with you, step back, observe and feel stillness within your being, and then you'll see that actually the stimulated answer that comes from the dialogue, in this case the wonderful Damien, will actually take on a totally different reality for you, which, as he's been describing, will heal whatever the level of judgment is. The prime reasons for deep dialogue was first stimulated by the COVID crisis, where I started having conversations with people that I noticed were opening up a very new field of deep causative conversation about the karmic consequences or indeed significance of COVID. And this is where it was born. And many world leaders, many soul stewards have come to this platform. And the prima facie or the prima facie reason for this is that we enter into a description of the new hierarchy of values that we can build a brave new world through. And this requires absolute responsibility of self and present mindedness. So this is why I've been dancing with Damien in the way that it is. And he completely trusts me, which is why he's able to go there. So I want you to embrace that. And there is this wonderful question that Giannis has asked. Dear Damien, as we observe within the collective, human beings often have great blocks around abundance and wealth, whether that means in relation to their material presence or their spiritual presence, whether it means to do with their materialness or indeed, living out the possibility of how they can shift scarcity consciousness. Do you have any wonderful words of wisdom about abundance and wealth?
Spirit. So for me, it's about embodying spirit. That's what I was told years ago by spirit. They say, Damien, you must clean your body from genetic imprints, from trauma that you've experienced, and really come in. Because when spirit enters the body, the vessel, you are abundant naturally, because you are creation. And as I said in the beginning, if there's, I always see a topic, for example, if there's a topic with abundance, it's multidimensional. It's never just one facet, it's multidimensional. So I always set the intention to bring consciousness that, say, it could be from my mom's line behind me on the left, it could be from my dad's line behind. So you see it like a pile of sand, a topic like a pile of sand. Some of the sand belongs here, my mom's, my dad's, some is past life, from the womb up to now, some has belonged to the collective, some is from my programming that I've experienced in this life. So you'll find that it'll start getting less and less and less. And then you'll start being more conscious and more in the body. So with abundance, it's really about connect. For me, it's really working with the first, second chakra and working what trauma is there and working through it. The lower chakras for me is like the vessel, the chalice so spirit can come down into the chalice. So for me, it's very, very important to work with your lower chakras. And then the Kundalini energy will rise up in the system, and then being able to contain the energy within your system. So there's it's multidimensional, the answer. I can't just give it in one go, and it's different for everybody. There's one thing I'd like to just share for anyone who was triggered, if it's okay with you, Stuart. So we're here in the human vessel to be triggered. Okay, so we could, for me, I could stay in a cave, meditate. I know I will evolve a certain way, but for me to evolve, I need to be triggered and bring consciousness to the trigger. So I need people to open my system and trigger me. And then it's to be conscious of where this energy belongs. Now, I may want to put it onto somebody in front of me, but actually that energy has nothing to do with the person in front of you. It belongs to your childhood. Usually from 0 to 16 is the wounds created. So it could be from your childhood. It could be from 0 to 16 with your mom, your dad. Often we miss it as the grandparents. So if I always set the intention when someone triggers me, I open up the systems and I say, okay, I allow unconditionally for this energy to go back to the origin. If it's from my mother's line, if it's from my dad's line, if it's from my ancestors, my past lives, if it's from, me in the womb with my mom, I allow it to go back, and you'll find that what's left is very small, and then I can speak it out to the person. Because if I am open and triggered, I try not to talk to the person until I work the system, because I know I will literally pour it onto the person, and it's nothing to do with Stewart, for example. It's me. So then your system will be triggered, and then you'll open your stuff onto me. And this is what's happening as a human on this planet, is that we're triggering each other and we're pouring it onto each other, but it's nothing to do with the other person because they weren't in your childhood. Maybe if they were in your childhood, then you can work with that as well. So for me, it's very, very important to work with your triggers, to work with the energy and use it as an opportunity for healing. We can use it as an opportunity to create dissociation or separation and destruction, or we can use it for healing. For me, as I always see triggers as an opportunity for healing. And often also Spirit guides me to trigger people to open opportunities for healing. So for example, if someone come for a session or coming into the workshops I do, usually Spirit will trigger them before they get there because they're ready. The healing happens already. So they'll get there super triggered because they're ready. Their system's open to be transformed. So it's a gift from Spirit. So if I feel triggered, I always see it as a gift, an opportunity of self-responsibility to transform it. And it's beautiful because if I do it that way, I become more whole, I become more chill, relaxed in my system, and more connected to who I am as Spirit. My essence can drop deeper within my system.
Well, the healing is complete, isn't it? So, we know particularly over the last 35, 40 years, it has been bandied around. What is necessary to move forward is holistic healing. But actually what you're doing is in a kaleidoscopic way, in a very meaningful way, in a highly significant way, but in a very human way, you're describing what the multidimensional aspect of that is all about. Unfortunately, we are going to have to come to a close. This has been the most amazing hour. And from the core of my being, the very depths of my soul, I really want to say thank you for being so wonderfully available and open to have this dialogue. And I pray and hope that you will come back. Because I feel the wisdom and the masterliness that you describe is really what we need. We need in the world to heal some of the great karmic lesions that we see in some of the most intense patriarchal constructs, as we see. The 100th monkey syndrome is dancing with glee through everything that you say. So everybody, sorry, were you going to say something?
I wanted to thank you, Stuart, because you're really a wizard for dialogue as well, and holding space for me to bring out something that sometimes difficult for me. For me, things are very normal. I remember someone saying, I had an organizer and she's saying it, but that's not normal what you're doing. And for me, it's like, well, I was born like that, so it's normal. So it takes someone to pin me in a corner and ask me the right questions, and you did it so beautifully. And I really want to admire your work and what you're doing, and your own personal work as well, and group field work you're doing. So thank you for having me.
This is the first opportunity that we've had on this level of professional exchange. I hope there are many more, because I feel that our joined fields will create a magnum that will help to, I don't mean this in a grandiose or prideful way, but will just simply bring about huge ripples of consciousness within the collective. So bless you for being here. And to all of you who have tuned in, thank you so much. If you haven't listened to the extraordinary deep dialogue I had last Monday, with Michael Mayo, who is a medium as well, he speaks about mediumship and how he trains people in one of the most grounded ways that you'll find today. So please do look into that. I feel that these two dialogues, both Michael and Damian, have stimulated an extraordinary potential for what this field of 12 male soul stewards will be about over the next 10 weeks. So bless you. And to all of you, and please, can you stay there just for a moment so I can come back to you, because we'll close down. I know that you have your heart hugely open for all of these wonderful people that have been with us, whether they're here. Oh, there's Damian's website. So don't forget that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here in person, and indeed for those of you who are listening into the recording, we send much love to you. Namaste, namaste, namaste. And thanks, Ryan.